The massive Allied armada slowly approaches the heavily fortified shores of Okinawa. Relentless naval bombardments quickly shatter the island's once peaceful coastal landscape. American troops push forward into a grueling and agonizing ground war. Historians note the brutal conflict closely resembles the bloody trenches of past wars. Meanwhile, thousands of deeply entrenched Japanese soldiers prepare for a desperate fight. Fierce kamikaze attacks soon turn the surrounding ocean into a fiery nightmare. The relentless artillery strikes completely wipe out key defensive positions inland. On the second day, massive fleets continue their coordinated aerial assaults. American commanders carefully observe the fierce struggles unfolding across the blood-soaked ridges. Severe weather later brings heavy rains, trapping exhausted troops in deep mud. Retracing the initial assault reveals how the complex amphibious landing was methodically executed. Tactical maps show the strategic maneuvers designed to outflank the dug-in defenders. Amidst the chaos, terrified civilians find themselves caught in the deadly crossfire. It all began on the first day, launching the largest operation of the Pacific. Okinawa was targeted because its location provided an ideal base to invade Japan. Anticipating heavy resistance, officers coordinated endless bombing runs to soften coastal defenses. Constant aerial support paved the way for the historic Operation Iceberg to commence. Capturing this island was the crucial final step after a string of conquests. Holding this territory would allow American bombers to easily reach the Japanese mainland. The massive armada relentlessly approached, aiming to cut off the Empire's supply lines. Thick smoke covered the horizon as the pre-invasion bombardment destroyed shoreline targets. Experts emphasize that securing the island's airfields was critical for future bombing operations. This new base would finally give infantry units enough space to train safely. Ultimately, taking Okinawa's severed vital shipping routes, signaling the Empire's inevitable fall. General Buckner confidently leads the massive American invasion force toward the island. Facing them, the formidable Japanese army has had ample time to prepare. General Ushijima commands the heavily fortified defenses scattered across the rugged terrain. Knowing the stakes, Japanese soldiers meticulously prepare their weapons for the coming onslaught. Even local civilians are mobilized, forced to build fortifications and support the troops. Japanese commanders privately acknowledge that their forces will likely be decimated here. Their primary mission is simply to buy time for the mainland's final defense. The Emperor himself understands the strategic necessity of this desperate stalling tactic. American forces face horrific resistance as they slowly push into the island's interior. The initial American landing focused on the western beaches to establish a foothold. These shallow reefs provided the perfect approach for thousands of eager troops. As the troop ships neared, naval guns unleashed a massive barrage to clear the way. Devastating napalm strikes engulfed the coastal hillsides in searing, inescapable flames. The first wave of Marines braced themselves as they approached the chaotic shore. They quickly disembarked, expecting heavy fire from the entrenched Japanese positions. Surprisingly, the advancing soldiers encounter almost no resistance as they move inland. The eerie silence leaves many wondering what the Japanese are actually planning. This unopposed landing feels more like a routine exercise than a brutal invasion. As they casually march through the open fields, the tension slowly begins to build. More tanks and supplies easily roll onto the secured beaches without any opposition. The lack of resistance is actually a deliberate strategy by the Japanese command. With their air force decimated, the defenders choose to pull back from the coast. They intentionally allow the Americans to land their massive forces completely unhindered. By drawing them inland, the Japanese hope to negate the deadly naval bombardments. Within hours, American troops easily secure the vital northern airfields without a fight. Casualties on the first day remained surprisingly low for such a massive operation. The main Japanese force is patiently waiting in the heavily fortified southern mountains. There, deeply dug tunnels and hidden bunkers from the formidable Shuri line. On the second day, the American advance splits to secure different sectors. Army divisions head south, while Marine units push towards the northern peninsula. The Marines quickly sweep through the north, encountering only scattered, disorganized resistance. Meanwhile, out at sea, the naval fleet faces a sudden and terrifying new threat. Devastating kamikaze attacks begin raining down from the sky with deadly precision. Young, inexperienced pilots are sent on these desperate, one-way suicide missions. Lacking fuel and proper training, crashing their planes becomes their only viable tactic. Before takeoff, the doomed pilots share a final ceremonial drink of sake. This tragic sacrifice is driven by their fanatical devotion to the Emperor. They view their impending deaths as the ultimate expression of loyalty and honor. Embracing their grim fate, the young men climb into their explosive-laden aircraft. Hundreds of these lethal human missiles launch towards the vulnerable American fleet. They relentlessly target aircraft carriers and battleships to inflict maximum damage. The USS Franklin is severely crippled, becoming a raging inferno on the water. Dozens of ships are sunk or damaged in this unprecedented aerial onslaught. Desperate anti-aircraft gunners fill the sky with flak to repel the endless waves. Despite their fierce defensive fire, many kamikazes manage to strike their marks. The psychological toll on the surviving sailors is immense and unforgettable. The Japanese also deploy small, explosive-filled suicide boats against the fleet. Hidden in coastal caves, these deadly vessels are launched under the cover of darkness. Driven by a single pilot, they silently ram into the sides of unsuspecting ships. The Japanese military commands its forces to stop at nothing to secure victory. Emperor Hirohito authorizes Operation Tengo to further weaken the Allied invasion force. This desperate plan centers around the mighty Yamato, the world's largest battleship. The Yamato is ordered on a one-way suicide mission to defend Okinawa's shores. Its objective is to beach itself and use its massive guns as coastal artillery. Knowing it lacks air cover, the crew understands they will not return home. However, American submarines quickly detect the colossal warship as it approaches the island. Admiral Spruance immediately orders hundreds of carrier-based planes to intercept the threat. Seeking to avoid a costly surface engagement, he relies entirely on his superior air power. Swarms of American torpedo bombers and fighters launch to hunt down the Yamato. They aggressively swarm the unprotected battleship, overwhelming its anti-aircraft defenses completely. Multiple torpedo and bomb hits severely cripple the pride of the Japanese Navy. The massive ship finally capsizes and detonates in a spectacularly catastrophic explosion. Nearly 3,000 sailors perish as the mighty Yamato sinks beneath the waves. This monumental loss deals a crushing psychological blow to the entire Japanese nation. Operation Tengo fails disastrously, effectively ending the Imperial Japanese Navy's combat operations. Despite this victory, the American forces soon received devastating news from home. The sudden death of President Franklin D. Roosevelt deeply shocks the entire world. Mourning soldiers pause their advance to pay tribute to their fallen commander-in-chief. The somber news momentarily lowers the morale of the exhausted troops fighting overseas. Japanese commanders quickly attempt to capitalize on this tragic event to destabilize the Americans. They airdrop crude propaganda leaflets, mockingly highlighting the heavy casualties and the president's death. The morbid messages cruelly predict that the remaining American soldiers will soon be annihilated. However, these desperate psychological tactics only harden the resolve of the American forces. As the battle drags on, the fight for the southern hills intensifies significantly. American troops face brutal, yard-by-yard combat against the deeply entrenched Shuri line defenders. Up north, the remaining pockets of Japanese resistance are finally cornered on the peninsula. The Marines methodically crush the final holdouts around Mount Yatek for intense fighting. With the north secured, commanders shift their focus to the small island of Aishima. Capturing its vital airfields is necessary to support the grueling southern campaign. Amphibious forces swiftly launch an assault on the island's heavily defended beaches. Troops coordinate their advance to clear out the hidden caves and fortified bunkers. The intense fighting claims many lives, including the famous war correspondent Ernie Pyle. Meanwhile, the terrifying reality of the conflict severely affects the local civilian population. Relentless Japanese propaganda had convinced many that the Americans would brutally torture them. Driven by this overwhelming fear, many tragic mass suicides occur among the desperate islanders. This horrifying outcome starkly illustrates the devastating power of the Empire's psychological manipulation. The tragic brainwashing pushes countless innocent people to choose death over perceived dishonor. Those who do surrender are shocked to find the Americans treating them with compassion. Slowly, they realize the horrific lies they had been fed by their own military. As the bloody campaign continues, the true course of this brutal island war becomes undeniably clear. The surviving American troops brace themselves for the final, agonizing push to secure victory, and the relentless battle pushes onward, forever changing the course of history. Historians note the extreme brutality facing both sides. As civilians find themselves trapped in the relentless crossfire. Young soldiers and innocents suffer terrible wounds daily. Flamethrowers scorch the once peaceful sugarcane fields to ash. Local directors recount the utter devastation of the island. While combat fatigue severely breaks down the frontline troops, exhausted Marines pull their muddy comrades to safety. And trembling hands smoke a cigarette amid the chaos. Medics desperately rush to treat wounded local women. The American flag is raised despite ongoing fierce battles. Intense firefights continue uninterrupted over the rocky ridges. Experts explain the deeply entrenched Japanese defensive strategies. Massive waves of infantry assault these heavily fortified hills. Rocket artillery relentlessly pounds the hidden enemy positions. As Sherman tanks unleash devastating blasts of liquid fire. Heavy smoke from explosives obscures the entire battlefield. Commanders watch the destructive barrage from a safe distance. While soldiers cautiously advance up the scorched dirt slopes. The assault at Kokazu Ridge results in massive explosions. U.S. forces violently break through the formidable Makanato line. The deep jungle foliage offers little protection from ambushes. Historians describe the grinding attrition of this campaign. By day 34, communication lines remain critical for survival. As bazooka teams fire on entrenched Japanese bunker positions, the remaining defenders refuse to yield despite heavy losses. Japanese leaders Yohara and Cho command the desperate resistance. Focusing on inflicting maximum casualties on the Americans. U.S. forces slowly push the bloody front lines southward. Amphibious landings attempt to flank the stubborn Japanese defenses. Marines charge directly through blinding smoke and enemy fire. Moments of rest are incredibly brief before the next assault. Naval bombardments continuously hammer the entrenched coastal areas. Massive water plumes rise from the heavy ship shelling. Meanwhile, Japanese command prepares for a brutal final stand. Because as Europe celebrates victory, Okinawa still bleeds. Spotter planes search for targets amid the horrific carnage. Desperate kamikaze attacks ravage the support fleet offshore. Marines desperately hold the high ground against fierce counterattacks. Field hospitals and dental tents provide only meager comfort. Soldiers quickly map out new artillery coordinates in the dirt. Fresh reinforcements march steadily toward the brutal front lines. Watching ominous smoke rising from their upcoming targets. The battle centers around notorious points like Sugarloaf Hill. The capital city of Naha is completely decimated by warfare. Aerial bombs obliterate the few remaining structures below. Machine gunners provide suppressing fire through the crumbling ruins. Captured enemy flags are proudly displayed as grim trophies. Nightfall brings terrifying raids and burning, collapsed structures. Marines take crucial cover behind traditional Okinawan stone tombs. Patrols move cautiously through the desolate, flattened city blocks. Even ancient churches stand as nothing more than hollowed-out shells. The advance continues slowly through the treacherous muddy jungles. The Shuri defense line becomes an intense ring of fire. Relentless rain turns the battlefield into a muddy, impassable quagmire. Heavy supply trucks sink deeply into the ruined dirt roads. Historians emphasize the severe logistical nightmare this weather caused. Bulldozers struggle immensely to keep the vital supply routes open. Transport vehicles are completely bogged down in the deep sludge. The terrible weather stalls the American offensive drastically. Soldiers wade through muck to retrieve essential artillery shells. By day 59, the exhausted troops press on relentlessly. The Central Command stronghold at Shuri is fiercely targeted. Coordinated airstrikes mercilessly pound the Shuri castle defenses. Marines finally break through the heavily devastated landscape. And the American flag is raised over the Shuri ruins. Top brass review the progress as ultimate victory seems nearer. Experts note the fall of Shuri was a major turning point. The Japanese leadership realizes their defensive line has collapsed. They retreat further south to make their absolute final stand. American tanks pursue them aggressively across the open fields. Maps show the U.S. forces pushing the remaining defenders back. Flamethrower tanks continue to burn out hidden enemy positions. The landscape is left completely scarred, scorched, and lifeless. Historians describe the deep desperation of the surviving Japanese. Disillusioned soldiers finally begin to surrender in small groups. Marines interrogate the exhausted, shirtless prisoners of war. Displaced Okinawan civilians gather, deeply traumatized by the violence. Elderly locals sit helplessly amidst the ruins of their homeland. Tragic civilian casualties lie scattered across the bloody dirt roads. Compassionate Marines offer water to orphaned, terrified local children. Civilians are carefully coaxed out of dark, hidden cave systems. Barefoot refugees walk away from the horrific, endless war zone. The brutal fighting shifts towards the southern coastal cliffs. Psychological warfare units drop thousands of hopeful surrender leaflets. Propaganda images promise safety to those who finally give up. Hundreds of defeated Japanese troops march silently into captivity. Analysts point out the extreme rarity of these mass surrenders. Surviving locals help transport essential supplies and wounded soldiers. Starving children eagerly accept basic rations from American soldiers. Severely injured civilians are gently carried away on stretchers. The final pocket of resistance is cornered in the deep south. Marines systematically clear out the last rocky defensive positions. The remaining enemy strongholds at Oroku and Yeju finally fall. By day 79, the organized Japanese resistance crumbles entirely. Final tank skirmishes secure the once deadly southern open plains. Exhausted units assemble to receive long overdue commendations and medals. Commanders pay their deep respects at newly established military cemeteries. Soldiers lay wreaths on the graves of their fallen comrades. Deep inside the underground command caves, all hope is lost. General Ushijima prepares for his traditional ritual suicide. Remaining soldiers wave white flags, emerging slowly from the dark. Historians reflect on the staggering human cost of the campaign. Surviving Marines begin the long, quiet walk away from combat. Local directors remember the eternal scars left on Okinawa's soul. Both top commanders perished before the battle officially concluded. The fiery conflict finally burns itself out completely in the south. The American flag flies at half-mast to honor the fallen. Soldiers gaze out over the cliffs where so many lives ended. Scholars conclude it was the absolute bloodiest battle of the Pacific. Command briefings immediately shift focus towards the impending mainland invasion. The sheer number of casualties deeply shocked the American public. Rows of white crosses stretch endlessly across the peaceful island. Columns of soldiers honor the immense sacrifices made here. The flag flies proudly, but the hard-fought victory is deeply somber. The physical and mental wounds of Okinawa will last forever. As smoke continues to rise over the heavily devastated Okinawan landscape, the terrifying scale of the island's complete destruction is finally revealed. Fierce bombings had mercilessly obliterated the vast majority of its cultural heritage, paving the way for American forces to establish a dominant military presence. Massive new air bases are quickly constructed to secure control over the Pacific. Meanwhile, the surviving local residents slowly emerged to receive crucial foreign aid, while exhausted troops tried to assist the deeply traumatized civilian population. Long lines of defeated Japanese soldiers are marched across the barren fields, locked safely behind barbed wire, as they face a completely uncertain future. Though this monumental and brutal conflict has officially ended for the world, the deep historical scars of Okinawa will forever haunt its blood-soaked soil.